You might not get it, but I say that these walls creep and they crawl. They like a stalker, waiting for you. If these walls even smell that you are despair, that you are anxiety, that you are losing hope, that you are without faith, they're gonna get you.
Well, that was a clip from Anne Frederique Widmann's film, Free Men, talking to an inmate who was on death row there.
Yeah.
Just before, Anne, lovely to see you this morning. Just before we talk to you about your film, and we're going to be talking to somebody who is on death row right now as well, hopefully very shortly.
No, an extraordinary insight.
The crime that you're talking about and the convict that you were talking to tonight was a very different circumstance.
Yes, so Billy Wayne Coble, 30 years ago, I mean, he's one of the oldest people on death row. He was convicted of murdering his estranged wife's brother, her mother and her father. I mean, it was an absolutely brutal crime.
So that's it.
So I think this might be Kenneth.
Hello, this is a free call from an inmate at Varner Unit. This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
Wow.
To accept this free call, press 1. To refuse this free call, press 2.
Did you know that you can rent an inmate tablet device?
Okay, it's an ad.
So we're about to talk... And tell us who we're about to talk to.
Okay, so Kenneth Reams, he's been on Arkansas death row for 25 years, sentenced for a murder that he has not committed. That's very important. He's calling us from his cell. From his cell the size of a bathroom, very small bathroom, and he's been on solitary confinement for 25 years. So what you're going to hear now is quite something.
This is extraordinary. So we're
Are you here?
receiving a call from death row.
Kenneth, can you hear us?
Kenneth?
Yes, I can hear you all.
Wow.
Yes. How are you all doing?
We are well, Kenneth. Thank you very much for getting in touch with us this morning.
Yes, yes. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning.
It's extraordinary talking to you, Kenneth. You were involved in a crime when you were 18 years old, you went out with a friend to steal money, frankly, didn't you? But in the course of that crime, a man at an ATM was shot and killed. Now, as I understand it, you were there at the scene, but you did not hold the gun or pull the trigger that led to that man being murdered. And you went on trial. The other person who was part of that crime with you was given a plea deal and pled guilty to murder and was sentenced to life without parole. You went on trial, did not take the plea deal, but were convicted of the murder, even though you didn't pull the trigger. And as a result, how many years have you spent on death row for that crime?
26 years now.
Now, you've just had... Yeah, you've just had, Kenneth, haven't you, an appeal which has had a pretty extraordinary result for you. Tell us what happened.
Well, the Arkansas Supreme Court ruled in November of 2018 that the trial counsel that I had representing me was ineffective in refusing to call my co-defendant into trial to testify on my behalf that he was the actual gunman in the crime, disallowing the prosecuting attorney's story to be posed to the jury that I was the actual gunman, for them to prosecute me and give me the death penalty, which they were successful with doing. The court said they was ineffective. My lawyer was ineffective for failure to do that. And then they also ruled that my case would be sent back to the lower circuit court to decide whether they would give me a new trial or not, simply because there was underrepresentation in the jury selection in my case. They allowed openly for the bailiff in the courtroom to pick the voir dire members that would be selected to sit as my jury.
And Kenneth, what does that mean now? You have lived under the threat of a death sentence for 26 years. What does that now mean for you?
It means that there's a possibility that I could be given a new trial. It means that there's a possibility that the truth can be told about my circumstance and my case. And it means that there's hope in tomorrow. It means those things.
Kenneth, can you just give us an insight? We're sitting in a TV studio. You're someone you know very well, Anne, is sitting at the desk with us, and you can imagine what that might be like. But can you tell us what you're looking at? Can you tell us the environment that you're in, that your cell, and what exactly you can see this morning?
Well, I am in the darkness as I speak to you all because the lights go out here every evening at 10:30 at night. So I'm in darkness. There's a television that's in the ceiling that is on, and I don't even know what it is that's on television. But I am in a small space, a 6x9 cell. It is solid concrete as if it is a tomb. Everything is within this cell. My table is concrete. My bed is concrete. My sink and my toilet is made out of steel, but it is a very small box. It is probably no bigger than the size of your average parking space. And I mean that literally, your average parking space. I've been locked in a small space that small for the past 26 years, under the assumption that I was the actual trigger man in the case that took place in 1993, which we all know is not the truth and it's a lie. However, I continue to sit on death row, and I'm trying to gain the support of the people. I need the support of the people in order for me to overcome this circumstance.
How have you changed in the last 26 years? Because it's one thing to be put onto death row and face that sentence. You've gone through this extraordinary period of your life and changed dramatically, I should imagine. And now to be told that actually they agree, that actually there has been a miscarriage of justice here and that you didn't pull the trigger and there should be a change in sentence. You could get another trial, but now you're just waiting. And you are still in solitary confinement. You are still on death row, even though you aren't facing the death penalty. How has your life changed and how have you changed, Kenneth?
Oh, there's been a total transformation for me. I can say that in many ways. My education, level one, me knowing myself, two, me dealing with the word forgiveness, asking the victim's family in my case to forgive me, me trying to work on forgiving and forgiving myself, me being able to understand what freedom is. Freedom is not necessarily just because you're open in a society where you can roam. You know, that's not just that's a small portion of freedom. But me understanding what freedom is, me dealing with remorse, regret, me finding love in this small space. All of these things has been a part of who I am now, my transformation. We want to educate the world, you know, about the ills of solitary confinement, the death penalty, the criminal justice system in itself in America. Because at 18 years old, I was placed in a situation where I did not pull the trigger in this crime, but they was trying to force me to take a life without parole sentence. That is a part of mass incarceration 26 years ago. We are in the era of mass incarceration today in America. But 26 years ago, this is what they was doing to me as an 18-year-old kid, saying that we're going to send you to the prison for the rest of your life if you don't plead guilty.
Can I jump in?
Of course, yeah.
Kenneth is very humble. You know, what he did from this small space is incredible. So it's so incredible that I made a film about it. It's called Free Men. It's on all the platforms now. But the first time we met him in a cage. And this guy, you know what he was doing? He was putting together a show in London. And it was an exhibit. It took place at the Temple at the fall of 2016. I mean, he's doing that from death row.
An art show.
An art show, exactly.
So he's an artist.
Exactly. He's an artist. He's a poet. He was putting together a play. He's doing a lot of things. I mean, it's really... he found all those resources in himself, and he's able to push back the walls of this small cell. Hey, Kenny, how do you do that?
By the strength that people give me, the strength of my wife, the love, the support, such as people like yourself, and many other people that is supporting me and trying to help. That's giving me opportunities to share my story and to tell my story.
And Kenneth,
to believe.
When you're living under the threat of a death sentence for so many years, how do you maintain hope, especially when you know that that death sentence is for a crime that you don't feel responsible for?
At some point, you just realize that life is what it be. At some point, you realize that in spite of what may have took place in the past of your life, you still have the future, you still have tomorrow, and you don't have to allow life to be defined by the mistakes that you've made or even your circumstances, because, hey, I am here in solitary confinement in America, but I'm giving the opportunity to share my story with a wide audience in Great Britain. So it's an example of it. Living inside my mind and going towards the things that I'm trying to accomplish and do.
It's extraordinary, Kenneth. And the other thing, you mentioned it there while you were just talking, you've got married while you've been on death row as well. Can you just explain a little bit about how that's come about and who your partner is?
Yes, my wife, my wife's name is Isabel Watson. We've been married now for, I believe, about 2 years, but we've been together on this journey for the past 13 years. She's from France. Hopefully at some point she will get the opportunity to see some part of this. But Isabel has been a whole lot to me. She's covered in the film Free Men, which Anne is, beautifully put together for us and showing part of our life, our relationship, and the distance that we are apart in spite of the circumstances and how we've managed to find love in the process. I think it's a cool thing. Hey, they put me in solitary confinement, but they didn't think that I was going to find love.
Incredible. Kenneth, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, pretty extraordinary to talk to you from your cell, a cell the size of a parking space, where you spend so much time in solitary confinement, although actually pretty extraordinary to see that photograph of you there
with your wife.
With your wife as well.
Kenneth, can I just ask you one last question, if I may? You've been quite explicit about it, but Susanna's documentary that she's done, a lot of the people she speaks to, one or two of them still feel that there is a need for the death penalty in certain states, despite the fact that there has been miscarriages of justice. How do you feel about the death penalty ultimately as something that can come down on people in America?
I think the death penalty in itself is wrong, regardless of where it is at, whether that be in Pakistan, whether that be in Japan, whether that be in America. I think the death penalty, it dehumanizes all of us. When I say all of us, not only the individuals that are convicted for the heinous crimes, in which some of them are heinous crimes at some point in time, the individuals that may be innocent on the death row, or the individuals that may be like myself. It dehumanizes the politicians, the victim's family, everybody. And I think that once societies realize that, that is when they begin to do away with it. So hopefully at some point, not just in America, but around the world, there will be people living on the earth, and the death penalty is no more part of what we call punishment. That's what I think.
Well, Kenneth Reams, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Extraordinary to talk to you. Thank you, Kenneth.
And, yeah, the film is Free Men.
Exactly, and I don't know if you heard it, but I think he's a very strong man, and Free Man is about this strength. It's not a sad, dark film, about death row. It's really about the strength all of us have. It's a love story. It's something uplifting.
Anne, thank you so much. The documentary tonight is this different case, Billy Wayne Coble, and a very different view of the death penalty, because the family of his victims absolutely 100% support the death penalty for Billy Wayne Coble. They think that he deserves it, that he reaches the threshold, and he slaughtered 3 members of his estranged wife's family. It was an utterly brutal crime. And for them, it's important, it's closure. you know, you often hear this word, don't you, that it is closure. He's been on death row for such a long time. I think what's interesting tonight is that you see sort of the unexpected victims. So the condemned man's son, Gordon Coble, finds it extremely hard to accept what's going to happen to his father. He condemns his father's crimes. He has enormous sympathy and compassion for the victims and the families. But he says, how do we have a situation where you are punishing someone for killing other people by killing them? He thinks that is a bizarre punishment and an unjust punishment. And you see the effect on Gordon, on his wife, and on his children, who have only ever seen their grandfather behind reinforced glass. Now, you may not have any sympathy, and you won't, for the person who's facing the death penalty in this case, you know, depending, obviously, on your view about the death penalty. But I think you'll really think about the effects on the family and the kind of long-term effects and how it affects them. And you'll see some of the consequences that you might not expect while holding in your heart at all times the victims and the constant horror of what happened to them. Here's a little clip of the show tonight at 9 o'clock. Are you frightened about next week?
Well, death is death. A person said one time, he said, that's a horrible way of dying. I said, what is a good way? Could you tell me what a good way is to die?
They tell you to kill 3 people.
My head's absolutely spinning. I feel enormous sympathy for the family. None of this changes the fact that on that dreadful August day in 1989, Bill Coble took a gun and went and murdered Bobby Vicker and his estranged wife's parents. Bill, you accept that you're guilty of those murders, don't you?
I accepted I did the murders, yes. I accepted that I'm here for those murders, yes.
And as he faces execution, he would be the oldest person to be executed in Texas for 100 years. And Texas and Huntsville, the death penalty capital of the United States, Texas last year, killed more people through the death penalty than all the other death penalty states put together. So pretty chilling stuff. 9 o'clock, death row, countdown to execution, ITV.
And Anne Frederique Widmann, thank you for joining us this morning and facilitating that conversation. It's extraordinary to speak to Kenneth, and as you say, what an incredibly eloquent guy he is, and to be facing the fact that he's still on death row. They've already said that the death penalty is gone, but they haven't organised. You'd think there would be a surge to organise the changing of his situation. Is amazing, and that documentary that you've put together, Free Men, is on demand online now, isn't it, as well?
Exactly.
So thank you for joining us.
Thank you
so much. Extraordinary thing.